Thank you all for coming and joining us here. We're excited to get nerdy with everybody and talk about Apple Search Ads popularity score and how to use this to drive keyword optimization and conversion rate optimization on keywords.
Yeah, a couple of words about Feature and us. So I'm Moritz. I'm one of the founding partners at Feature. Set up Feature 6 years ago, and we're a mobile growth consultancy in Berlin, and now also have offices in New York, which Gabe is running.
Yes. And my name is Gabe Kwakyi. I'm Feature's Director of US as well as Acquisition. Acquisition is the unified ASO and performance marketing teams, organic and paid together.
I'm going to skip over this slide. I think by now a lot of people actually already know what we're doing. And we have a lot to actually present. So we're going to start
timetable.
With... This is our timetable, which was supposed to have been removed, but we have to really rush through this as in usual fashion. I actually added way too many slides. And it was also a little bit last minute that we had to put this together. Yes. But we're going to talk about the search popularity score and when it was introduced, then why it matters to App Store optimization, and then the work that we did with our growth and insights team to decipher basically the real value behind those scores. And then we're talking a little bit about painting a realistic picture based on the keyword ranks and also the impressions that you're getting for these keywords. Gabe will finish up with a session on driving keyword installs via CRO.
Yes. Yeah, so this is a little bit of a recap. Most people are probably familiar with this, or maybe some that are new to ASO may not, but just looking back at search popularity score and just keyword prioritization, where it came from. When the App Store was launched, it was a lot of gut feel optimization using web data, using autofill to try to see like, maybe these keywords are a little bit better, or these other ones. And then along came tools like AppTweak, which gave their own estimations at the time, which were very valuable for prioritizing keywords. There was actually a non-public API that Apple provided, first-party data, the search priority score, or the keyword priority score, which was interesting, and we'll get into that in a couple of slides, but it didn't quite tell you search impressions or volume or anything. And so the launch of Apple Search Ads was fantastic. This is where we finally got first-party data from Apple Direct of what the volume estimations per keywords were. But it didn't really translate into impressions, and so adding share of voice data in 2021 really enabled us to use that search popularity score and the impressions we were getting to calculate the number of impressions available, which we'll get into in a few slides again here. So search popularity, on the front end, really not that useful. Blue dots, 0 to 5 of them, what does it really mean? But on the back end, it actually translates into something that's much more valuable and useful, a scale or a score from 5 to 100. Not quite sure why Apple chose to start at 5, but it is what it is. However, this is an exponential curve as you go from 5 to 100, such that when you move from a score of 80 to 81, it's a very, very large increase in the number of impressions and searches available at that level versus going from a 10 to a 20, for instance. And you can see that search popularity also, it's important to note, is not static. This changes as the search trends actually change throughout the year, throughout the seasons. Here, for example, you can see that there are some seasonal terms. Black Friday, for instance, the blue here. You can see that Black Friday really has a very significant change in search popularity. It goes from somewhere between 20 and 30 all the way up to 80. And remember that this is an exponentially increasing curve, and so getting up to 80 to 90 is a very, very high number of searches, and going down to 20 is a very low number. So just one thing to note here is that search popularity score is not static. And so just keep in mind that and redo your analyses based on the latest data.
Yeah, so why it matters for App Store optimization. So basically, since the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store launched in 2010, App Store optimization, keyword optimization specialists were really a little bit in the dark when it came to that volume. Gabe already alluded to it. What we were basing our kind of estimations on how much search there was actually happening on a certain keyword was, first of all, Google Web data. Actually, most of the tools provided kind of one-on-one Google Web data and ported that over to the App Store. But of course, people search entirely different on Google than they do in the App Stores. And then the second one and the third one was basically one and the same, is like looking at, okay, how many, or what is showing up in the auto suggestions, and assuming that there's actually a lot of volume behind that. And the third one was really looking at those priority scores from those auto suggestions. So small excursion to those priority scores. They're not available nowadays anymore. Apple started hiding those. But someone, I think back in 2015 or so, discovered that Apple was basically returning these priority scores when you were kind of querying, when you were searching for a certain search term. And those scores were static per search term, and so basically you could infer from those scores how much search traffic was happening. But of course, those numbers were also not the number of monthly searchers, but rather actually also a very confusing metric that Apple was provided. I think only a few people in the industry really cracked through that and figured out which keywords to go after. So basically, that meant that a lot of kind of the work that was going on keyword optimization was wasted because people were going after the wrong keywords, especially those folks that were really looking just at web volume data. And that has really changed since search popularity was introduced in 2016. Now, Apple is a little bit vague on what that actually means. So basically how they describe that in the Apple Search Ads manual is like, search popularity is the popularity of a keyword based on App Store searches. Search popularity is displayed as numbers from 1 to 5, with 5 being the most popular. That doesn't help us a lot, so we actually started asking some Apple reps and got an answer that, first of all, that this is actually really based on the relative amount of searches happening in the App Store on an exact match search term instead of a broad match search term. So really that specific keyword rather than all the keywords that are related to it. And that's important. But secondly, it also, and we found this also when we were querying that data ourselves at Feature, that this is really specific to a specific storefront, right? The Germany search popularity scores are different from the US search popularity scores for Black Friday. So basically with that number, you can now, and we started putting that, we could now really pursue high volume relevant keywords in ASO strategies. And we have at Feature, we're using a framework called the keyword optimization cycle. And you see that search volume data is actually only this very small part of the keyword optimization cycle, but I would argue that it's one of the most important parts because it really helps you prioritize your keywords across your metadata accordingly. That still left us with the question like, okay, what does that search popularity between a 5 and 100, what does it actually present? We see, for example, Facebook being 100, Instagram 80. These are not numbers of today. It probably looks a little bit different. And meditation 60, and any kind of garbage keyword that you would enter in Apple Search Ads would always return 5. So basically we're already kind of excluding anything that is 5 because that's the lowest number that Apple would return. But yeah, it left us with this question, okay, what is the difference between a 40 SP score, and we call search popularity SP score, what is the relative difference between a 40 and a 50 search term? And yeah, soon after this came out in 2016, I think the first people started blogging about it in 2017. I think we all realized like, hey, these are not linear scores. So the number of searches are going exponentially. That was, yeah, basically acknowledged by the industry pretty quickly already, but it still left us with the question like, okay, what can we actually estimate how many impressions there are happening on a daily basis on a certain keyword like meditation? And back in 2020, our data science and engineering team, led by Merlin Penny, started working with Search Ads HQ to look at their data sets. So Search Ads HQ is working with a bunch of advertisers across the world. And we were getting all that anonymized data from them on how many impressions their advertisers were seeing on certain keywords. And we started first plotting that out on a graph, but it looked quite messy. And then we realized like what we need to look at is like what is the maximum number of impressions that that a certain search popularity is giving to an advertiser. And then what actually appeared from that there was a much clearer kind of exponential line. We had to do some data cleaning. We had to also go through a couple of extra hoops, such as that the search popularity is lagging, right? So actually the day that you're measuring the impressions, it might be a bit different from the day from the search popularity score itself. So there was a lot of data crunching that we won't go into today. But what basically came out of that was this very clear exponential curve from search popularities and the number of impressions that people were getting on the maximum kind of the top end of impressions. And out of that followed a formula that we could be using to really look at, okay, what is the difference between a 40 and a 50 search popularity score, right? The question that we were trying to answer for ourselves. And how much absolute traffic is there happening on those keywords? And here you see that for the United States, but we did a couple of these for other bigger storefronts as well. And there it became clear that, you know, the difference between a 40 and a 50 is almost twofold, and the difference between a 40 and an 80 is 10 times. So it became very clear for us that actually, you know, most of the traffic is happening in that higher segment. But then there were two things that were basically still missing from our research. One is, like, we were looking at the maximum number of impressions that advertisers were getting. But of course, we were, you know, limited, first of all, by the data set. And secondly, probably none of those advertisers had 100% share of voice. Apple is always giving some kind of impressions to other bidders on those keywords. So it was not a perfect estimation, even though we shown the exponentiality. We still had doubts on like, is this the absolute maximum that is happening on such an SP score? And then secondly, it was also very hard to replicate that for other storefronts. As again, like we're only as good as how many data points we were actually being able to look at in this big data set.
So with Apple releasing search impression share data to advertisers through the platform, that gave us new data points that we could use. And remember, I don't know if anybody remembers, search or share of voice data was available from Apple Search Ads reps. You could say, hey, give me the share of voice, and they would give you quartiles, 0 to 25%, 25 to 50%, and so on. Well, that was better than nothing, but it was not quite as useful as what Apple provides now, which is decile-based. Granted, it's still not the actual 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, but this gives us a lot more data to work with. And so we took another swing at calculating the number of impressions available. One thing to note is that 0 to 10% share might mean that you actually have 0% share. And so in the analysis that was run, we actually excluded keywords with 0 to 10% share, but we still had quite a lot of data points that we could use. And so we tripled the number of data points that we were using to run the exponential curve to predict the number of impressions available by our search popularity score. And for instance, we combined actual ad impressions, in combining ad impressions with share of voice with search popularity score, we might find that a search popularity score of 10, we observe driving 300 impressions, and if Apple tells us it's a 70 to 80% impression share, average of 75%, we can calculate the number of impressions available is 400. So doing this for all the data points that we had gave us a new exponential curve, and yeah, we feel really good about this curve at this point. And on the next slide, we can show the something else that is really useful and interesting, which is that even if we have fewer data points in different markets, we're able to use all those data points because we're able to back out the number of impressions available from Apple's share voice data. And so we're able to draw these predictive curves in multiple markets. And what was interesting was that when we indexed the curves in each of the markets to 100%, we found that they were nearly perfectly overlapping. And so what this means is just that we have confidence in our approach that it's producing consistent results by markets, which enabled us to really feel confident about running this analysis in multiple markets. But just as a gut check on the next slide, we did use some data from Sensor Tower just to say, like, okay, what's the difference in the number of downloads that we should expect in one country versus another one? Does it kind of match up with download estimates? So this was just a gut check that we used. Everything was looking good. And so proceeding on, the new methodology and how it compares to the old one. So the new methodology using share of voice data from Apple in red versus the old methodology, that's the maximum observed ad impressions in blue. You can see that there's a pretty steep difference in the curves of this. The old blue, a lot more flat, and the new red, much more curved and exponential and biased towards the high search popularity keywords. Now, we actually believe that the new curve that's more steep is the more accurate representation of what the nature of the store is. Really in digital marketing, digital advertising, it's kind of like this winner-take-all, like very viral, concentrated nature, where the more popular you are, the more share that you get. The better your Facebook ads perform in click-through rates and conversion rates, the more that Facebook gives you share. The number one ranked apps, take the large majority of the share. And so naturally, with such search popularity score, we would expect that higher search popularity keywords are taking the vast majority of the number of searches that are actually out there. And so we do expect that, we do think that this more steep methodology does, again, represent the nature of it. And one other insight as to why the old and new methodology differ is because the old methodology was using the maximum observed ad impressions. And as Moritz mentioned, we're probably not going to be able to drive 100% share on some very competitive keywords like photo editor, for instance. So we were probably never really able to see what 100% share on a search popularity score of 70 is, just because we couldn't capture that much share. All this to say, we feel like the new methodology is aligned with reality. And so moving on a little bit, there were a couple caveats just to note about this. One is that search probability score is based on exact match keyword searches, but not necessarily Apple search ads data. Impressions that we're using in impression share is based off of Apple search ads data, and not every search generates an ad. It's pretty close to 100% fill rate, but just as a caveat, using Apple search ads data to extrapolate out the total number of searches, because not every search gets an ad impression, is underestimating just a little bit the number of impressions that are likely there. Also, Apple returns the same SP scores for iPad and iPhone, and so we use data to compare the ratio of downloads that go to iPhone versus iPad in order to distribute the searches to each of those. We feel like this is a really good, fairly accurate way to predict the number of searches available and prioritize accordingly. One question kept us up at night, and that's what share of searches or downloads goes to each app based on its rank.
And for that, we had to use a little bit more of a subjective estimation as to how many people are converting on the first search result versus the 10th search result. And assumptions that we made here are the higher up in the rank, the more above default you are, the more likely it is, of course, that users will install the app. The further down you go, it will decline pretty quickly. Secondly, people searching for a specific brand, like if they're typing in Headspace in the App Store, then they probably want to convert on that, want to download that specific search result. So for branded searches, there's a lot less discovery going on, whereas for generic searches like meditation, people are still a little bit in exploratory mode, looking at the screenshots, comparing the different meditation apps out there, and then converting on either of the top 10 search results. And then thirdly, the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store are also laid out very differently, right? On the App Store, you have one big ad and then half of the screen of the first organic search results, whereas actually on the Google Play Store, you have a lot more that is kind of displayed from the get-go. Again, this is not tested. These are assumptions that we're making at Feature, so I would also love to hear feedback on what we're presenting here today. But basically, just as an explanation on how we're thinking about that at Features, like we have these two a branded search term, a generic search term, say that they both return the same search results, then for what we would expect for the branded search term headspace, maybe 5% of the conversion is going to a competing Apple search ads, but actually 80% of the search traffic is landing at that first search result, and then it tapers off pretty quickly. And then for a generic search term like meditation, there's a lot more, like I said before, a lot more exploratory or discovery going on, and probably Headspace ranking number 1 there would get 40% of the downloads, Calm 15%, and so on. And then if we combine that with those conversion curves, with the search popularity scores and kind of the number of impressions that we're estimating to be on a specific search term, then we can really look at the number of installs that these keywords are driving. So on the left, you have the branded search term Headspace, search popularity score of 60, meaning with our formula, with the exponential curve that Gabe was showing earlier, we estimate that there are around 3,700 daily searches happening on the brand. Meditation, it's also a very high SP score, but again, because these SP scores are exponential, actually the number of daily searches is a lot less. 1,900, still impressive, but it's not as much as on the Headspace brand. And if we then kind of multiply that by the estimated conversion rate of each of those results, we see kind of what the daily number of estimated installs are on each of these apps. And if you basically start tracking this for all of the keywords that you rank for, and you have kind of the estimated daily downloads for each of those based on the keyword type, based on the search popularity score, and based on the conversion rate estimation, you basically land at like the estimated daily downloads. And if you then combine all those estimated daily downloads together, what you should end up with is a very close, a number that is very, very close to what you're seeing in App Store Connect in terms of the number of search downloads. And that was really what we were trying to get to, because ultimately, if you're going into App Store Connect and looking at, hey, did this keyword update actually affect my search installs positively, it's really hard to really tell which of the keywords actually have done that. And therefore, getting to a methodology where we're much closer, where we can basically add up all those daily installs from the individual keywords, really helps us drive keyword optimization forward. So we expect this number to never be 100%, because we are making a lot of assumptions in our model here. But we actually were able to predict with 90% accuracy for a lot of our US clients the number of downloads that they were actually going to get from search. Two caveats, like I said before, it's a very simplified model. We have 2 conversion curves, one for brand, one for generic. But what if it's a branded search like Lego and people see 10 different Lego search results? Which one are they going to convert for? That's like it's an estimate there. So we're only as good as the assumptions that we're placing on this, and we might actually in the future adjust this model further. And then secondly, also in markets where we have fewer data points, the results that we saw in terms of accuracy matching up with the total number of search downloads was a little bit lower. Basically, we're using an internal tool called Toaster for this to basically indeed per keywords. And this is actually an example of one of our clients where you also see like most of the installs are actually driven by the branded search result. And that is also something that we're seeing across the board. Still, keyword optimization can bring some additional uplift there as well. And we are following that basically on a daily basis and seeing after an update like which of the keywords were actually moving the most number of daily extra installs, and which of the keywords did we experience a little bit of a loss maybe. So then that brought us kind of to like an accurate picture of the number of installs per keyword, but it still kind of left 2 questions unresolved. It's like, considering that we're already ranking number 1 for a keyword like photo editor or like Bitcoin, how can we actually convert more of these users? And then secondly, if we're not ranking number 2, probably because we have a poorly converting app on that keyword, how are we able to actually increase our conversion rate for a keyword like Bitcoin and then subsequently move up in the ranks?
So it's pretty essential to optimize your CRO for success. And if you're doing keyword optimizations, at the end of the day, once the priority keywords are in your priority metadata areas, ASO then shifts to optimizing your creatives and optimizing the conversion rate so that you can get more share and improve your ranks over time. There's not endless keyword optimizations you can do to suddenly get to number 1 eventually. So this is essential. And the question is, how do you secure more downloads? There are a few different ways to do this. One is to use search ads data and just understand your demographics a little bit more. So you can run a single keyword ad group for the 1 or 2 or 3, several keywords that you want to improve your rank on or capture more share once you're already at number 1. And make sure that you use a high bid in order to get good coverage across all the searchers that are searching that term, and use a campaign budget cap to make sure that you're not overspending, and then look at the data. So look at your gender, look at age, and understand who are you actually speaking to in terms of your screenshots, your title, your assets, and all of that. So this is one way to understand more about how to improve your conversion rate optimization. Another one is to actually look at how search trends and user demand are changing over time. Remember that search popularity is not static. It's going to change by month, by year, and so tracking this over time is important. Additionally, the keywords that people are searching change over time, and competitor apps are always popping up. New features are being released. Operating systems release new features and things. And so if you are not making changes to the assumption of who you're speaking to in terms of the keywords that are being searched and what you are relevant for, you're going to fall behind. Your competitors are going to take your share or take the new share that's coming in, and it's going to be tough for continuing to grow. And so what this is kind of alluding to is that it's important to track a basket of keywords and group them into keyword groups. And understand how those keyword groups are changing over time. So your relevant and related keywords, put them in groups, and then, for instance, here, this is speaking to different features for this particular app, and we're looking at feature 6, for instance, which is the blue bottom bar, and feature 5, which is the red bar here. And these, for this particular app, were the most important top features that are driving the most searches and downloads in 2017. However, you can see that the share that's going towards those 2 features significantly declines over the years. And share is being taken and captured by features 3 and 4 in the purple and green here. So this is really, again, like kind of anonymized data, but showing that making sure that you're tracking the number of impressions and downloads that are going to different keyword groups over time is an essential part of continuing to be relevant and improve your conversion rate optimization. Because if you're not speaking to the latest user intent, then again, you're going to be falling behind. Another way to improve your conversion rate optimization is to run single keyword ad group create a set tests. This is, again, where you're putting, for instance, here with tours, forget your guide, take tours, put it as an exact match keyword into a single keyword ad group, and then run different creative sets for this. See which screenshots, designs, captions, order improve the conversion rate on that particular keyword. If Get Your Guide really wants to rank number 1 or improve their share out of tours, this is really the only way to get conversion rate data on different assets for that one keyword. Even after product page optimization launches, that's going to be looking at all users. It's really not going to tell you which assets that I can produce and test improve share in this particular keyword. And if you do this for the top keywords that you care about, then you can get a sense of what assets are doing the best job at driving conversion rate up, and then you can build a cohesive set of screenshots that learn from each of those different areas. And you'd be surprised that there are differences, significant differences in the conversion rate of different screenshots for different keywords. So even after product page optimization arrives, continue to run single keyword ad group, creative set tests to improve your share on the keywords that you care most about. And then I think the last one is something that we're doing a lot more exploration at Feature, and this is user research. It's very easy to get caught up and swept away in just A/B testing. Conversion rate uplift, estimated conversion rate uplift, saying, okay, this asset outperforms that asset. But at the end of the day, if you have an A/B test that tells you plus 0.5 to plus 10% improvement in conversion rate, you have a win. That's great. But that's a very wide range. How do you know what's really causing people to convert lower or higher in that range? Ultimately, that means that the conversion rate uplift is somewhere between 0.5 and 10%. Could be anywhere in there. And so unless you're actually gathering additional research from asking users in surveys, doing user interviews with people, how are you really going to know what's causing those different subgroups within that your overall user base to convert differently? And so get discussions and actually get user feedback and understand, what's causing people to consider downloading or not. What are their decision-making criteria? What features are they most interested in? What user intent, are they bringing? What use cases do they want and care about? Actually, show your assets versus, your competition, and ask people which of these is most interesting to download and why. In doing this, it's important to make sure that you're targeting net new users, not your existing users. Your existing users have already chosen to download your app, and so if you're only surveying those users, you don't know the other people that are going with the competition, or maybe not going with any app at all. And so, use SurveyMonkey or Nielsen or these different vendors to actually get respondents that are representative of the audience you're trying to capture. Survey them to make sure that they're not already existing users, and ask them these questions. You could also use a Facebook campaign to do 1% lookalike, on your target audience, exclude users who you already have, and then use incentives, to have them go through and do the surveys, or actually speak with you and do an interview. So this is, really important to make sure that you're getting the qualitative supplemental data, not just the A/B test hard conversion rate differences. And wrapping it all up, again, make sure that you're estimating the impressions available for the keywords that you want to optimize for, to prioritize what you're going after, and then from that, estimate the number of downloads that you're driving using the methodology that we presented today, and then make sure that you're not disrupting keywords that have good share of downloads, and that you're really testing after each optimization you make, have we actually moved the number of downloads that we're getting up? And then run research to really make sure that you're raising the share of downloads available for those keywords, again, through understanding your user audience, demographics, looking at the user trends in related and relevant keywords over time, and then mixing both A/B testing and user research to understand what creative concepts and hypotheses you're working with, and which ones actually resonate most with users. So just wanted to say that we are looking for folks to come join us and continue building out our approach to keyword optimization, as well as conversion rate optimization, and many other areas of the mobile growth stack. So we're definitely looking for folks in ASO, principal squad lead, senior consultants, data analysts. We're also looking for CRM consultants, performance marketing consultants, subscription optimization leads. We've got lots of roles open, so if anybody is potentially interested in joining Feature and knows somebody who is, please come talk to us after. We'd love to connect.
Thanks, everyone. And big shout out to Hugo, Rafael, Francesca, Merlin, and Baptiste and Maggie, who were working on this data piece with us. They're not here today, but they contributed a lot, so just wanted to make sure that that's recognized. Thanks, everyone. Any questions?